the video I dread every year, where I tell you what my worst albums of the year were. And last year I only did 5 because I could only bear telling you about 5. This year though, I decided to do 15 of the worst albums of the year, at least in my opinion. Why 15? Because, well, there was a lot that I listened to this year that I didn't review, mainly because they probably didn't give me a lot to talk about, so I didn't put them in review form. So even though technically my channel will say that I had 20 album reviews total this year, I definitely listened to a lot more, and a lot of the stuff I chose not to review was just bad and just wouldn't have been great in a review form because it would have been so short. So you're gonna see a lot of those in this video today, but there will be no dishonorable mentions. It's just straight 15 to 1, and I know that there's going to be a disagreement with some of these albums on this list, and that's fine. You have your opinion. It's going to differ from mine, and that's okay. So now that that's out of the way and that disclaimer is there, let's just start off with an artist that I'm actually really familiar with and actually have tattooed on my body. Okay, so I don't actually have Ace Frehley tattooed on my body. I just got this Kiss tattoo, and of course there's his makeup there. And I've always liked Ace Frehley's solo stuff too. I feel like his former Kiss band members, Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley, just gave him too much shit, like they weren't that appreciative of him, and I always thought he was treated very poorly and can understand why he left. But man, this album, dude, like, I can't even explain it. Like, I get it, he's older and whatnot, and he was never a great singer to begin with, but there's just something about his voice that it doesn't have that same feel as it did back then, and even a couple years ago when he was still singing and doing just fine. I think at this point, it's just better for him to join his Kiss bandmates and retire. That is, if his Kiss bandmates stay retired, because they have a history of being like, oh, we're done, and then coming back a couple years later. Next. Boy, number 14 might even piss some people off too. I'm kind of scared to show it to you, but here you go.
She said, be gentle with my silk and lace, and I said, well, all right.
That's right, a Johnny Cash album in 2024. Now, it wouldn't be odd if Johnny Cash was still alive to make these albums, but Johnny Cash died 21 years ago, and now we're getting an album from him, and I know people say, well, they did release a couple albums after he died for like 3 years, but he had been recording those albums were getting finished, that's understandable. But why now would this be released? For some context for this album, this was an album that Johnny Cash wrote back in 1993 and finished, but he wasn't happy with the finished product, so he just scrapped it overall, and I can see why. But his estate wanted to push this thing out because, I don't know, Johnny Cash's legacy is dying off, which, newsflash, no it's not. People are still listening to his songs, they're streaming his songs, because he's Johnny Cash, and similar to like Elvis Presley, he's not going anywhere anytime soon. I don't know. It's probably because I was never a fan of Johnny Cash once you got past the 80s, because it just became kind of boring to me, but this album just doesn't really do anything for his legacy. It kind of just makes me go, oh, yeah, I see why he didn't want to put this out, because this thing's not that great. It just doesn't have anything memorable or anything close to a hit song that you would expect from Johnny Cash. It's just kind of there for the most part. Next. This artist was on such a roll, and now it's just like, what's going on?
Ooh, what you doing? Don't know who you think that you're confusing.
Radical Optimism by Dua Lipa is a letdown. Dua Lipa used to make fun music, and now she's just making generic music, I guess. I mean, she's always kind of made generic pop music, but she's always been able to mix certain genres in with them that made it somewhat interesting. But now I think she's just fully embraced the generic, that it's not even really that fun anymore. This is her second straight album where I'm just like, you know, where did the fun go? What happened here? Like, I don't know. Dua Lipa, to me, always had that potential to be something great, but I think that sooner or later a fall off is inevitable, and I really don't think there's any avoiding it. Next. Oh, I'm gonna get a lot of hate for this one, aren't I?
I could eat that girl for lunch as she dances on my tongue. Tastes like she might be the one.
Hit Me Hard and Soft by Billie Eilish. You know what I'm gonna say? Billie Eilish has never put out a good album. She's a singles artist, and even a lot of her singles aren't that great to begin with. I was on the Billie Eilish train for like a year before I realized, like, it's not really my thing. And going into this, I know we didn't hear any singles beforehand, so it was kind of like, you got to go into the whole album just being like, okay, here's what we got. And yeah, it's just boring. I mean, I don't understand it. Even the biggest single, Lunch, it's so cringy. Like, I don't know. I don't really know people who like this. I mean, a lot of people like it. Apparently, they're calling it Billy's best album, but in my opinion, I would say it's her worst, just because, again, not really doing anything for me, and there's not a lot of songs on here that I can say that people are going to go back and listen to once this album cycles over and she moves on to the next, because there's just not a lot of memorable songs to come off it. Next. Such great talent just being wasted.
Yes, and say that shit with your chest.
I mean, early Ariana Grande songs, there was some bangers, not gonna lie, but ever since releasing Sweetener, it's kind of been up and down for me, and a lot of down. After Seven Rings, yeah, that was when I was like, nope, not anymore with Ariana Grande. Nope, not even gonna even worry about it. And I've still been listening to her albums just to kind of see where she would take it. And with Eternal Sunshine, there's nothing there at all. Even the lead-off single, Yes And, although at first listen you're kind of like, yeah, okay. By the second or third time you hear it, you're just like, oh, whatever. It's just a single to promote the album. That's all it is. It's nothing great. Like when you look at Ariana Grande's singles in her history, this one is kind of like on the low tier of actually being good. And she wastes her voice a lot nowadays. Like, I'm not saying she doesn't use her great singing voice. She just uses it less than what she used to. And I don't know, I think that brings the songs down a lot too, because she's got a great singing voice, but now she's starting to lean into more of like the, pop and some sort of pop rap thing that she does sometimes, that it's just so off-putting, and it makes me not want to listen because I can't take her seriously when she does that. I don't know, I feel like she's not trying as hard as she once did. She's just shitting out albums to shit out albums because she's Ariana Grande, and as long as her name's on it, she'll be just fine. Next. Speaking of shitting out albums, yeah, Taylor Swift exists.
I'm so depressed, I act like it's my birthday every day.
You're probably surprised that the Tortured Poets department is not higher on this list. But, I mean, come on. It was inevitable that would be on here anyway, and we're all kind of tired of Taylor Swift, especially me being an NFL fan. Every time I hear about the Kansas City Chiefs, I have to hear about how the tight end, Travis Kelce, is dating Taylor Swift, and that every time she's at a game, you see her every fucking 5 minutes, even though when Eminem was at a Detroit Lions game last year, you saw him one time, and then that was it.
We do not care.
But, hey, I guess I'm just a hater to most of those people when it's just kind of annoying because, yes, we get it. We know who Taylor Swift is. She's big, she's huge, and she might actually be bringing more of a female audience to the game of football. But at some point in time, you just gotta go, how much is too much? And that's becoming a thing with her albums, too. She is so quantity over quality nowadays that why do people even bother listening to her albums? You're gonna get the same old bullshit every single time. And, re-recording her albums to get full, custody of those, that's fine, whatever. But these new albums she's putting out, I don't know. I haven't, listened to a song of hers in a while where I'm like, this is actually really good. I mean, she did have that, what was it, Nevermore, Evermore albums that she put out a couple years ago that were fine, I guess, but they weren't anything that jumped off the page at me. They were just like, okay, this is cool, a little bit of, country twang, getting back into it, bluesy kind of thing, I liked that. But with her pop stuff, it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse with every listen, and you just can't escape her. It's like, just when you think that you're away from her for a little while, she comes back at the exact wrong time, and she just puts out an album that is the same as the last, but yet somehow shittier. So make of that what you will, but this album deserves to be on here. Next. Oh, how the mighty have fallen.
So if I get jealous, I can't help it.
I mean, this man's DUI mugshot was bigger than his actual fucking album. People were talking about his mugshot left and right because they thought it was funny that Mr. Justin Timberlake got arrested for a DUI for whatever reason. I don't know, because they hate the man. I mean, yeah, it's kind of funny, but at the same point in time, could be going through some things. I don't know. I don't want to speculate that. I mean, he's still married, whatever, but we never know a lot of the time what's going on behind the scenes with somebody. And with this album, I was hoping that it would be better than Man of the Woods, because Justin Timberlake, he tends to take a while in between records. So you knew when we got Man of the Woods in 2018 that it would be a hot minute before we would get something from him again. 6 years to be exact. But with everything I thought I was, somehow comes out worse than what Man of the Woods was, because at least I'll give Man of the Woods this. He was experimenting and he tried. With everything I thought I was, I don't really know what he was going for here. Like, the songs are just, there's no structure to them. They're not memorable like they should be when you think about a Justin Timberlake album. Like, every Justin Timberlake album has those memorable songs or two, including on Man of the Woods with like Say Something and Filthy, even if for the wrong reasons. But with this album, you can't really point out a single and go, that's the highlight of this record, and that's the problem. I'm just starting to think that people don't really give a shit about Justin Timberlake's music anymore, which stinks because you would think at a time when NSYNC has kind of, gotten back together that people would care, but sadly, doesn't seem like they do.
Next.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just fell asleep listening to the new Coldplay album.
Feels like I'm falling in love.
No, but in all seriousness, this thing is bad. I mean, I know Coldplay is supposed to be releasing one more album next year before they just kind of, I don't want to use the word retire because they're still going to tour, but they're just going to be more of a band that tours to play the singles rather than puts albums out. And to that I say, thank God, because really since Viva La Vida they haven't put out anything great, and it's just a mush at this point. It's like they still exist, but yet nobody cares that much anymore. It's almost like U2. Like, every time U2 releases something, I'm like, oh, people still give a shit? Like, I thought they were done with you in 2000 or 2014 when you put your entire album on everybody's fucking phones for whatever apparent reason. Like, Coldplay just lost that kind of, I don't want to say intensity, but they always sort of had some cool themes around their music and albums, but now it's just the most generic shit, and even the themes they use, kind of more like space-leaning themes and stuff like that, it's not anything that I would say is good at all, and I think they're just trying too hard to kind of make their magnum opus to finish out their careers, but it's failing miserably.
Next.
So the reason I didn't review this album in video form this year was because I retired this band from my channel after their last record, where I was just like, you know what? I can't keep doing this. I'm done. Doesn't mean I'm still not going to listen when they release new albums, because, maybe they'll win me back at some point. But let's be honest, this album didn't win me back with them at all. I mean, I guess the best thing I can say about this record is that it's 9 tracks long, it's very short, whereas the past couple of albums, they haven't been, so there's that. But the thing is, it's bad. I don't understand how Imagine Dragons can just continue to get worse. Like, their first 2 albums are so great, and even Evolve has some good things on it, but once we got to Origins, it just seemed like they were taking the simple way out, and they got more and more bland as we went on, and cringy as we went on, to a point where it's just like, who are they making this music for? Because I don't really hear about them that much outside of a single or two that might pop up, but that's about it. It seems like their staying power is kind of becoming less and less with each release, which I don't want to call it a good thing, but let's be honest, no one really wants an Imagine Dragons fix anymore, because we just know what we're going to get at this point, and it's not as fun as it once was. Like, this was a band with so much promise that 12 years ago released a great debut record, and now we're here, where they're continuously a reoccurring character on my year-end list for worst album of the year, because they just seem to be not trying at all. Or I should say, they're just more out of ideas at this point, and I would dare say that Imagine Dragons is the Nickelback of the 2010s, where they had some good stuff that you can defend early on, but as we get later into their career, you're kind of like, ew, 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 ew. I get the hate.
Next.
Man, Post Malone, what are we doing, man? Now, I want to make this clear. I don't hate this album because it's a country album, because you guys know me, not a big fan of country music, especially the modern mainstream country, whatever that bullshit is. I just felt like Post Malone could have done this so much better, and yet he went the route of just copying every other country artist known to man. I mean, his voice is fine. I do like his voice in this. I think that he uses it to perfection, but he treats this thing like a rap album where it's overbloated with a bunch of songs, a lot which don't need to be on there, and this thing is caked in features, and it's not even good features. Like, it's just a bunch of country artists who are popular in the scene, yes, but don't do much for the genre in itself because they themselves are kind of just copying off of one another. I mean, outside of Dolly Parton and I guess Hank Williams Jr., all the other features just fall flat on its face, and Jelly Roll is on this album. And can we talk about how Jelly Roll is just collecting the infinity stones of, like, genre features? I mean, he was on Eminem's album, he was on Falling in Reverse's album, he's on Post Malone's album. Those are 3 albums that are 3 completely different genres that all have Jelly Roll on them, and not to mention he released his own album, which was like country and rock and rap. It was like, this man just can't make up his mind. All in all, I had high hopes for this thing. I thought it was gonna work, but Post Malone, again, just continues a trend of not being able to make a good album, but just kind of have singles that carry the whole thing. And I think, too, he made this record because he had gotten scared that his last 2 pop albums didn't sell well, so he wanted to change things up, which is fine. It's just make it good.
Next.
I mean, I don't know what I was expecting with this album.
Chanel number 5. If I want him, he's all mine. I'm not just how to fuck with his mind.
Camila Cabello's always been a bad artist, even when she was with Fifth Harmony, and as a solo artist herself. I mean, Havana to me is, I guess, decent enough. But whatever this album is, I don't know who told her this was good and why this took, 3 years to make, but holy shit. Plus, she said that she had like a completely different concept for this album originally, and she has a bunch of other songs on there, but she felt like these were the best songs. And to that I say, if these were the best songs, I don't want to hear the songs you left off the album, because holy shit. I can't really explain to you this album in general and how bad it sounds. From the lyricism to the music, there's not even really good hooks on here at all. It's basically just what you would expect from a bland mainstream pop record of the 2020s. It gives you nothing to offer and is only here because, hey, stream purposes. You gotta gain those streams because the more popular you are on streaming, the bigger you'll become. And if you're going just for the streams rather than going for making something great, then you're doing it wrong.
Next.
Okay, you know what? I'd rather listen to Camila Cabello's record than whatever this is.
Box in the V like give me a light. Got ass so the pants fit tight. Take a man, I'm getting him right. Big knock like why would I fight? Box in the V.
To be honest, I don't even know why I listened to this thing. I was not a big fan of Ice Spice going into this, and I pretty much knew that this was going to be a letdown. I mean, we've had artists before pop up that are huge, expected to be the next big thing, and then they release their debut album, and all of a sudden, they just fly down. Look at Lil Tecca, or look at Chance the Rapper, where they were putting stuff out, mixtapes, EPs out that we all loved, but by the time they released their debut record, we were just like, what the hell is this? And with Ice Spice, I know that she was pretty popular on songs she featured on, whatever, and she was pretty big last year. But who thought, like, yeah, when she makes her first solo album, it's going to be great, because there's really nothing there. I mean, outside of just the aesthetic that she plays, there's really nothing. I mean, how many bars about being the shit and farting do we need? I mean, what are you, J. Cole?
I'm finna pull on these bitches like Winnie. I do my dance on a nigga like Diddy. I'm the shit, I'm that bitch, I'm his poopy. Juice in my cup got me feeling real loopy.
Ew. Even that's an insult to J. Cole, because J. Cole is still good at rapping. He just throws out the whole I'm the shit bar every so often, so I can't even blame him for that. Ice Spice throws out the shit fart bars every fucking song, and it's funny the first couple of times, but after that, you're just kind of like, okay, if that's the best you can come up with, then obviously you're very limited as to what you can do. And again, like the Imagine Dragons album, this thing is short, but it's bad to where it feels longer than it is because it gives you nothing to enjoy, and you're just sitting there going, is it over yet?
Next.
So this was an album review I did this year that definitely, I would say, probably got the most hate of all the ones I did this year. But, you know, I stand by what I say. Katy Perry's done.
It's a woman's world and you're lucky to be living in it.
I mean, the lead-off single, Woman's World, tanked so badly that she had to release her second single shortly after, even though she didn't really want to do it, because she wanted to make sure that when this album came out, people weren't going to forget about it. And you know, people did very quick. I mean, good lord, I just don't understand how a woman in her 40s, or she might almost be 40, I don't think she's 40 years old yet, who's a mother, who's married, has the most immature lyrics. Like, it just doesn't make sense to me. Like, early on in your career, you know, when you were singing the stuff about I Kissed a Girl, California Girls, you know, whatever, that was earlier in your career, but you feel like you would mature nowadays, and you kind of did a little bit on your last record that tanked as well, but this is now 3 albums in a row where people just haven't given a shit and have called it one of the worst things they've heard all year. It's starting to become apparent that no one really wants to hear from Katy Perry anymore because there's just nothing there for it. I mean, even when she tries to make an empowering anthem, it gets so fucking hated on because it's so cheesy, and I guess the point it's trying to get by just doesn't come out right. Like, it's not the fact that she was trying to make a woman empowerment song with Woman's World that's the problem. It's just she went about it in the wrong way, kind of looking at situations that weren't necessarily a problem to begin with. And then all the other songs have this kind of same sort of, you know, synth beat in the back. A lot of the hooks aren't that memorable either. At this point, Katy Perry is just done. Like, if she releases another record, I would highly, highly be surprised if it was any epic comeback, because at this point, she's proven that her time in the sun is done, and that happens sometimes, but I think she's still kind of in denial that it's lasting longer than it is.
Next.
So my runner-up for Album of the Year was actually the worst Album of the Year for a while, but I kind of cheated because I don't usually put EPs on this list, but when an EP came out after this that was way worse, I had to put the EP at number 1. So just know, this album being at number 2, it's still probably the worst album I've heard all year, but I just couldn't put it at number 1 because there was at least some redeeming qualities early on with this, whereas that EP, there's really nothing to enjoy. But at number 2, we have Mr. Ronnie Radke and Falling in Reverse.
The voices in my head keep on telling me I'm gonna.
7 years. It's been 7 years since Falling in Reverse released an album, and at this point, it's just a Ronnie Radke solo project, and you know what? It's not good at all. Like, even the singles that released during this time that I liked have just kind of... I've gotten tired of hearing them because they've constantly been on the radio, considering the first single to this album, which is the title track, came out 5 years ago. And this was originally supposed to be a part of an EP, and it has 11 tracks on it, and by the time the album came out, we had already heard 7 of the 11 tracks, meaning that there was 4 tracks that we hadn't heard. None of those do anything to bring the album up or make me go, oh yeah, there's, you know, some good things on here. Like, even though I liked the title track and Zombified and Voices in My Head's okay, they've been so overplayed that I'm just tired of it. And when I went back and listened to the album, I'm like, oh, you're great, cool, these are here. I mean, the cringe rapping from Ronnie Radke, the generic metalcore breakdowns, like, he's one of those artists that is all over the place, not because he's good at it, but because he's one of those people that's like, I can do whatever the fuck I want, which is true, but at the same point in time, do it well, do it good. Plus, he sings a lot about being the bad guy and stuff like that, and how people are trying to cancel him for stuff that he did years ago, because, you know, he went to jail, but he served his time. And yes, Ronnie, I get it, I understand, you went to jail, you served your time, but you're not a changed person. A lot of the stuff people have been calling you out for have happened anywhere between last year to 2 years ago and whatnot. You're still a scumbag. Like, nobody's going like, hey, that thing Ronnie Radke did back in 2011, we should cancel him for that. Like, no. People are trying to hold you accountable for stuff that you're recently doing. You've been jailed within the past 3 years, and you just don't get it. You don't understand why people, I don't necessarily want to use the word hate you, but I guess that's the right word to use, because there are people out there that absolutely just despise you, and you continue to sing about it like you know what's going on or you understand why people dislike you, but in the end you don't, and you continue to just make cringy music that, even though it's more popular than it ever was for you, it's frankly outdated. But hey, what do I know? Ronnie Radke's out there making millions of dollars, living his life, and I'm just some album reviewer that is single, barely makes a living wage, and doesn't know shit about music.
Next.
So, what is this EP that I was talking about that I had at number 1 here? Well, let's just say someone familiar to the number 1 spot on my worst albums of the year list has made it here again, making them the first 2-time winner. So, congratulations on that, but they also brought a buddy with them.
I'm not enough. Hope this wasn't fair, no.
I mean, at least MGK's not ruining pop punk anymore. Alright, let's be serious. Let's be honest. Like, we knew this was going to be bad from the start. Just the title in itself, Genre Sad Boy, should show you what you're getting yourself into if you so desire to listen to this project. I mean, I don't know. Like, Trippie Redd has never been a cup of tea of mine, but I get it. I understand, I guess, you know, him doing something like this. But MGK is in his mid-30s. He's got a teenage daughter, and yet he's singing about teenage shit like he was doing with his pop punk stuff. Like, it never ceases to amaze me with him, like how just his lyrics can continue to get more and more immature, and it doesn't even feel like he's genuine about this stuff. Like, yes, I know that he is a guy who has depression and he deals with it a lot of the time, but when you're singing about it like you're 17 years old, I can't take you seriously. He mumbles his way through like he just doused a thing of cough syrup, and he's incoherent. His rapping's not great. He has cringy singing vocals. There's acoustic tracks on here that are just god-awful. Like, the whole aesthetic of this thing was just doomed from the start, and the fact that this is like his big return to rap music after, rock music kicked him out, it's like you went back to a genre that shunned you because you were shit, and you decided to diss one of the biggest rappers of all time, knowing that you were probably going to lose that battle. Then you went into another genre that was loved, and you went after one of the biggest artists in that genre of all time, only to leave that genre again, go back to the genre that shunned you. I mean, this is almost like a bad relationship. Like, the abusive partner, you finally leave them, but then you're like, oh, but I love them so much. Like, yes, they treat me like shit, but it doesn't feel right without them, and you go right back to them, and it's the same result over and over and over again. And at that point, it's just kind of like, I can't help you anymore, because you're going to continue doing the same old bullshit no matter what goes down. Like, he could have made the best thing he ever made and could have shut us up, but instead he calls up Trippie Redd and goes, hey, you want to make this whole like genre sad boy thing because we're sad boys and we want to sing about it. Like, let's be honest, dude. You made this album because you were trying to reach a certain demographic, which I get, but it's probably not the demographic for you at this point. Like, at least try showing that you've matured a little bit, and then maybe I'll respect your music a little bit more. For now, you're sitting here at the #1 spot for Worst Album of the Year, making you, MGK, my first two-time winner, as just a couple years ago. His album, Mainstream Sellout, also made my #1 Worst Albums of the Year list. So again, congratulations, MGK, on making Austination history. Well, there you have it. That was my 15 worst albums of 2024. I would really like to hear in the comments below, what were some of your worst albums that you heard this year? Heck, what were some of your most disappointing? Because again, there was actually a lot of disappointing stuff on here for me. Some stuff that I was anticipating that just ended up not being what I thought it would be, and it was just highly upsetting. But stay tuned next week when I actually give you the video I look forward to making every year, that being the 15 best albums of 2024, and you can see what I have as my album of the year. But until then, that's it for me. Have a happy holidays, and I will catch you all in the next one.